Hello and welcome back to the MacGuffin Takes. I'm your host, Michael, the Joker of this podcast, and I'm here joined as always by
Oh
the
my God, I
Batman
would
of this
reverse that.
podcast.
I would reverse all that. It's
How's it
going
going?
fine. Now we are back. We will
We are
see.
back, yeah, after a while. I'm excited to be back here again. As to the brief explanations why we were gone, I remembered this quote here. Life is what happens to us while we are making other plans. So interpret those as you will. But yeah, we wanted to come back and talk about a director who has a movie coming out in a couple of weeks, and that director is Christopher Nolan. The movie he has coming out is The Odyssey, which I'm really looking forward to, and we're probably going to talk about as well
We
on here on
can
this podcast.
go into our retrospective of Christopher Nolan today, which we haven't done yet. I feel like we
Yeah.
have never really talked about his film, like even just personally, you and I.
No, I think we did
We talked about
talk
some
a bit
movies for
about him.
sure, but not like, through the whole thing.
Yeah. And did we see Tenet together?
Yes, we
Could
saw
that be?
Tenet together, and I think that's it, right?
And that's it, yeah. To start us off, I wanted to ask a little bit of a provocative question. Is that why is Nolan considered a film bro director?
I can explain why. I have an opinion.
And maybe first we need to clarify what a film bro is, and you're always up to date with internet slang, so maybe you can
Okay.
explain it to me as well.
Let me Google that for you. No, let me check because I don't think I would put it in words very nicely. So, a pop culture term for a movie enthusiast, typically a young man, who claims to be a serious cinephile, but mostly praises well-known mainstream male-driven films. And I think here already in that description, you see a lot of things that point to Nolan and why he is the film bro director. Let's break it down. So first of all, a
Nice.
serious cinephile we have here. And I think what draws people in when it comes to Nolan is that his films are kind of cerebral. They are not on the surface most of the time. I mean, take Tenet. It's essentially a very convoluted plot and it's very hard to follow, and you have to be like really locked in for this whole time. So it claims to be very serious, right? So that's one thing. And the other aspect that I see in this description is male-driven films, which if this is exactly what I meant when I said that I would like to mention some of the common criticisms, because this is one of the ones that you had mentioned a lot is that he does have only male characters and women are essentially just accessories to the male characters. It's either the trope of the dead wife that happens in a few films. So it happens in Memento and it happens in Interstellar. Uh, well, wait. Actually, I said Interstellar, I meant Inception, but now that I think of it, Interstellar too. So, I mean, not so much because we never hear anything of the wife, I think, but um yeah, well, Inception, it all fits into that category, and Tenet also has a female character that is a bit more prominent, but still basically is a prop more so than a three-dimensional character.
Yes, she's more like a Bond girl, if I
Yeah.
remember, sort of in that vein. Mhm. Yeah, but actually, those 2 points that you just brought up were things that I was thinking when I was doing my prep for today. Yeah, the first one, you mentioned it that his films are very cerebral, which they are. He's also a very visual filmmaker, or there's some like cool element to his films, and I'm guessing that's what draws a general or wider audience in. For example, I was just watching Inception, and there's this one scene where Leo and Elliot's Page Carter are sitting in the streets of Paris, and
Hmm.
then the world sort of collapses onto them, and there are also these
Yeah, no,
infinity
I think it
mirrors.
is,
Um,
he makes relatively accessible films. Like they are maybe sometimes difficult to understand, but I think they are for a wider audience. They are, I would say that Nolan is a mainstream director, not not an art
mhm,
house kind of David Lynch type of guy, you know?
mhm. Yeah, and maybe why film bros
Yeah.
feel so strongly about Nolan is the cerebral aspect, because you can or you usually you have to go back to these films to understand some of the layers his films have, and that's maybe where film bros
Hmm.
feel so, oh,
Hmm.
he's amazing, or I'm so
Exactly. I think
smart,
that's it.
because they understand. Yeah, yeah. The second point was the lack of female protagonists, and yeah, that's something I also realized, and I was thinking more of it in the terms of, well, can we judge a director for things he is lacking? I mean, it's filmmaking is also always very subjective and personal, so maybe he plays to his strength, and writes the character. Well, he is not always writing the characters, but is portraying characters that he
Well,
knows, and that
yes,
those are men. But
I
yeah, still.
agree to a certain extent that this is maybe unfair to criticize someone on the basis of how they choose to portray certain things or their perspective, because obviously, as a man, you have a male perspective, and you probably um, gravitate towards telling your stories from that perspective too, which is fine. This is natural. But my problem is with that is less so the choice and more so the fact that it just seems to happen from one movie to the other. It's not something that is happening in one film and then changed in the other. The trope with the dead wife, I think there is a term for that, that is exactly describing this dead love interest, right? That serves as a motivation for the male character. Is Yeah, it's happening in practically every film, and if you see it from one film to the other, it just gets a bit boring, and it is very predictable because I mean, I don't know. It would be nice to see, of course, as a woman, it would be nice to see women that are not brought into this film just solely for the purpose of serving the males in the story.
Yeah, I was just thinking, maybe an even more interesting question would be, why are there no female protagonists? Is it because of the topics he approaches? But I don't feel like it's a very, I mean, you could probably swap out some of his characters and it wouldn't make too much of a difference. I don't know. I'm
Like,
just
in which
speculating now, but
situation do you mean?
yeah. I don't know. I was just, because it's fresh on my mind, Inception. Could that be like a female
I feel like it
protagonist?
could, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm saying is that there isn't, I
Yeah.
feel like some of the protagonists don't have like very male or
Hmm.
female characters, so they're quite human, I
Yeah,
would say.
exactly. They are
And
human, and that's
it's
fine.
good
That's
to exchange them.
great. But why are they all men?
Mhm.
If you said you could
Yeah, yeah,
swap,
exactly. Yeah.
then why don't you? I mean, no, it's fine. Like, if I
Yeah, yeah,
think
yeah.
about, for example, there are a few characters. but very few characters. That's the whole problem. That are females and that are playing a bigger role. I mean, Elliot Page. Okay, well, Elliot Page is a bit of a different case, because, and yeah, but still, this is a female character in Inception, and um, the character does play a bigger role. I don't know if this character is so it has as many dimensions as, for example, Cobb does, but I think as far as other characters go, other supporting characters, it is probably of a higher position than other characters. So Arthur or what was Tom Hardy's character there. And I mean, Memento also has another female character that plays a role, a bit more of an antagonist role. But I don't know. I think it would profit. His films would only profit from things like that, from positions like this. Of course, like Oppenheimer has two female characters, but considering what role they played in the real life story of Oppenheimer, I think they could have had, they could have been portrayed differently and with more gravity than they were.
What's the second character in
It is
Oppenheimer?
Florence Pugh's character, and it is Oppenheimer's wife. So I don't
Hmm.
remember the names now
Yeah.
anymore, but yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I mean, for him just to switch him up. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, a very personal decision, I guess. But yeah, for characters like Oppenheimer, of course, and Batman,
Yeah,
I mean, especially for Oppenheimer, it's impossible to switch because
but
you're
see,
portraying
I
a
think in this
historical
sense, for
figure.
example, there is a male perspective, and like the it has to be a man. And I guess it's one of the themes, maybe like one of the minor themes that people don't usually talk about when it comes to Nolan films is maybe some criticisms of like society and of capitalism in a way. And this exactly has to do with a bit of patriarchy. Here we go. And the fact that men are in prominent roles in those films. I mean, for example, Batman, yeah, of course, a woman couldn't play Batman because Batman is a male character, right? There are female alternatives to Batman, but then it wouldn't be Batman anymore. Oppenheimer, of course, is a biographical film, but there is a certain kind of aggression to those characters. There is a certain level of like, well, aggression, for example, in the sense of Oppenheimer, just the aggression he brings into the world, or the a way for people to act on the aggression. So it's like an ultimate symbol, of being able to destroy each other is this atomic bomb, right? So I think maybe it's in a way that, and of course, this is mostly perpetuated by men.
The other thing I was contemplating is that there are two factors that might influence his decisions on male protagonists. One is, I mean, the setting, the historical setting, or just the context of the story. And here, for example, I was thinking of Memento, and well, it's sort of is it a sort of, it has influences of noir, but it's a simplified. I would say it's a very, like you said before, an aggressive world, a gangster world. So yeah, I mean, a male protagonist makes sense there. And then something like The Prestige, or well, Dunkirk as well, where just because of the historical setting, I mean, male protagonists make sense. And the second point, I think that's probably even more relevant, is the motivation of these characters. And did you just mention greed before? I mean, I think, yeah, greed could be a strong motivator that women feel greed too. But yeah, in some of these, maybe that's a bit more dominant
Mm.
on men than in women?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know. I guess in a way we can say that, of course, it is influenced by Nolan's perspective as a man. I mean, the some of his works were written by his brother Jonathan, right? So, who is also a man. So, of course, it is very male dominant. That's why it has space, of course. It's just what is annoying about it is that women really are treated like props and devices rather than actual people. That is that is what we're trying to talk about here, and the criticism is about that. Um, well, I don't know. We'll see how it goes in the Odyssey because there are
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of female characters there too,
Hmm.
which are actually story-wise supposed to be very kind of driving the story forward, I think. So,
Hmm. Yeah, but no, that's an interesting point here that how women end up portrayed as their sideline. And maybe one thing that explains is I just saw also a video, a short video on Nolan explaining some of his filmmaking. And he said there that he was very interested in the subjective. And maybe that's why women are sidelined because, like we said, he usually tells the stories from a male perspective, and it's, I guess, Dunkirk might be one of the exceptions, but it's usually very focused from one perspective, from the protagonist's perspective. So that's why, yeah, we see the point of view of a man. I think like something like a Interstellar or maybe even Inceptions. Maybe you could swap out the man for a female protagonist. At first glance, it doesn't seem like it would
I
change
think
too
out of
much.
all the films, like if I look at the films, I don't remember Insomnia so well, so I will leave it out. But I would say The Prestige and Inception are the best candidates to swap something out for a female character because Inception, I feel like, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have this very male heavy perspective in the sense of like there's nothing about and well, at least not on the surface, nothing male dominant in this character that would make him necessarily a man, right? And the prestige, I mean,
Yeah, I
okay,
agree. Yeah.
culture or historically speaking, okay, but I mean, it's a film. You could play with it. I'm sure you could also do that with
Hmm.
a female
Hmm.
character. I think it would work. This story is essentially about two people kind of competing, right? So it's about a competition, and maybe it would be even an interesting dynamic to see a competition between a man and a woman. You know, it's not a romantic relationship, but it's like really a competition between two magicians or two illusionists, right? So I think
Hmm.
this, yeah, could be interesting.
If I think about
Or
two
that,
female
yeah.
twins and sort of, yeah, that sounds, and I think there is probably a lot of competition happening during those times when between women, especially if they are, I don't know. I'm thinking like of
Hmm.
aristocracy or something like that. But yeah,
Hmm.
that would be
See?
really interesting.
We just created a better film.
Nolan, take some notes. Oh, yeah, Insomnia. Actually, there is this character. I don't have her name, but the this police officer or investigator um uh where the main character arrives to, and I thought that she had sort of like a not co-lead role, but she has an important role in that movie. She's sort of the protege or the successor of the protagonist, and I thought she was a strong female character, and yeah, actually surprising a bit. I Let me see
I
if I
mean, I
can
see
find the
Hilary
name.
Swank here, and I see Maura Tierney.
It was probably
I
Hilary
mean, you would have to
Swank. Yeah.
check, but yeah.
We talked about some of Nolan's themes or why film bros are attracted to Nolan. What are other of Nolan's trademarks and maybe trademarks that you find interesting or would like to discuss?
I mean, I think one of the things that gets mentioned all the time is his fascination with timelines. So we can get that out of the way and discuss that now. I'm sure we'll come back to it
Yeah, for
over and
sure. Yeah.
over again, so might as well introduce it now.
Yeah, so I have thought of him in the way of motifs or symbols or languages he uses. I don't know if there is a visual representation of time in his movies, but it's one of the themes that always occurs, and it's also an element he takes advantage of, right? Because time is one of the elements he gets to play with
Hmm.
in movies as a medium. Well, the most prominent feature is that is his non-linear
Hmm.
storytelling, right? Which happens, I guess, in almost all of
I
his
think so,
movies.
yeah. Well, I mean, we can actually discuss this by going through each and every one, if you would like to do that. And then we can track whether it is happening in every one. So you can start with the following, since you're the one who saw it.
The following. Yeah, actually, it does happen here. Is it non-linear? Yeah, it's again a bit similar to Memento that we follow this main character who has sort of two phases we see in the movie. And one is when he starts following people just out of interest, and he has like a specific style, like longer hair. A bit later, once he have done has done this job a couple of times, and in working with this other character, also
Hmm.
called Cobb, I think, and then he is a bit more stylized. He's wearing a suit and cuts his hair short. Yeah, which is a look that I think comes up a lot in his movies, like this
Hmm.
sort of almost like business man or suited man. And well, it's basically those two moments a bit interwoven, and we see that it's usually they go to a place, and we see that place when he breaks in. Well, when he just started doing the job, and afterwards when he's working with this cop um, guy.
Yeah, and I think so here we see at least this one trope that kind of follows Nolan uh, along his whole filmography is playing with time. And another thing that we should probably mention here is that the film is in black and white. So um, that could have been also I mean, I'm sure it was a choice. I think maybe it had to do with the fact that you didn't have to um, match colors or think of the natural light and the colors in the natural light, so you could just simplify it because the film had a very low budget. It was a very low budget film. Yeah, I mean, you probably had to think of technical things that could simplify the work.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, simplification is a good word for this movie because you see him using a lot of the resources he uses in his later films, but yeah, it's minimalistic, and I think it plays into his uh, noir influences or themes he likes to talk about. It reminded me a bit of Jean-Luc Godard, Breathless, which, well, I think it was last year where Linklater released this film Nouvelle about making of that film. Yeah, the aspect ratio reminded me a bit of that, the fact that it was black and white, and more towards the beginning of the movie, it was also very raw, that it felt like you were almost feeling like stuff was happening in the moment, more towards the beginning of the movie. You were thrown in there. Yeah. Mhm.
And also this one was written by Nolan, right? It was not written by Jonathan Nolan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. Well, how did you like it?
I really liked it, and it's on only
Mm-hmm.
70 minutes, so it's quite enjoyable. It also reminded me a lot of After Hours, which is a movie that we
Okay.
both really enjoyed.
No,
I think we
After
watched it.
Hours. We watched you're thinking of the King of Comedy that we
King
watched
of Comedy.
together.
Okay. But yeah, it reminded me a lot of After Hours
Mm-hmm.
about this also like labyrinth and being lost and maze, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
get to that
Yeah.
as well, I think. But I guess let's move on to his second
Mm-hmm.
movie, Memento.
Yeah, I think this is the one where you see the beginning, the kind of the unfolding of this interest of the timelines, and it just is built exactly on that, right? Um, it is happening in, I think, several kind of, well, parts. I don't know how to explain it. This is hard to explain. But basically, some of it is linear, but most of it is not. So you're watching it kind of from the beginning or from the end to the beginning again, right? Yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah, I just saw a brief
Hmm.
explanation of Lonan on that. So it's I think
Hmm.
there are two storylines told in a forward
Hmm.
fashion, but they're
Yeah,
intercut
but they
between
are
them,
not. One of them is not.
and
Well, okay.
one of them is
Yeah, one of them
backwards.
is backwards, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the present one is I think backwards, and then the black and white
Yeah, I think
is
something like
forward.
that.
One of these, like, yeah. And then, well, it was interesting to see because she drew a diagram on the
Hmm.
map, and it was sort of like a curve, like
Hmm. Hmm.
a D almost. And then at the end, both
Yeah,
storylines
exactly.
meet. And I thought that was really interesting because that diagram showed that Nolan is also a very visual thinker
Hmm.
about how he approaches his movies. And maybe this, I mean, he said that he likes to sketch a lot when he is developing movies. And I think that's how it later translates to some of these visuals that we talked about, like in Inception, the
Hmm.
city
Hmm.
folding over itself and so forth.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, definitely kind of a technical element to it, right? I think this is another aspect of Nolan's work is that he is considering very technical things. Um, I mean, from structuring the story a certain way, it needs a certain way of editing it, right? So this is just one aspect of it, and another aspect is how you shoot things, and I think that we'll get a little bit later to that.
Yep.
I think Memento is probably the ultimate film bro film out of Nolan's filmography, I would argue.
Yeah, it is mentioned
Right?
like
Okay,
that's one of
I'm right then.
the movies that's yeah, yeah. Yeah, I would have to rewatch it because like it's very complicated and I've only seen it once, so yeah, definitely something I should get back to. The other one, the next one, Insomnia, I've seen fairly
Okay.
recently, I think this year. Oh, actually, this might be where it's actually
I
told in
think it
linear
is, and I think
fashion.
that's probably the most normal, if you can call it that, Nolan's film, which
Hmm.
is I I don't know, like maybe I don't know something about it, but yeah, to me it seems like the most non-Nolan film in his whole filmography.
Well, actually, the way that it is
Hmm.
told is linear, but time is still really relevant
Hmm.
in this story. Because it takes place, I
Hmm.
think it's
Yeah.
Alaska or something along those lines. Yeah, Alaska. And well, it's one of those places of these few places we have on the planet where basically
No night. Yeah.
there's no night.
I
It's
mean, I wouldn't say
all
there's so
sunlight.
few. It's all of the north. Really?
Yeah, and the south as well, yeah. But I mean, for the majority of people,
Yeah.
that's a really strange thing, right? And that I think shows in well, that you lose track of
Mm-hmm.
time, or the
Yeah, in
character
that sense,
loses
yeah.
track of Pacino's character loses uh, track of time, and the days are really stretched, and well, he also loses a sense of reality. What's real and not, and is he awake or not, and so yeah, I guess that's
Mm-hmm.
how time
Mm-hmm. Okay.
is addressed in
Well,
this movie.
that's true. And also, I think what you can, if you break it down, so Memento is the previous film, and the next after Insomnia is going to be Batman Begins, which is kind of a huge deal. And between Memento and Insomnia, there's 2 years, and between Insomnia and Batman, there is 3 years. And Batman is a huge franchise, right? I think maybe that was a deliberate choice to direct something that is not his own. So it is not, it was someone else's project, right? It was a story that was already there, and he was chosen as director. I see here actually that Steven Soderbergh recommended Nolan for this film as director. So I guess you can say that this is probably done in a way to show that he can work with other material that is not only his, and that he could work with a kind of a starstruck cast, right? Because the cast in Insomnia is very impressive. It is Al Pacino, it is Robin Williams, well, Hilary Swank, we said. So this is a bit of a step forward from Memento. I mean, of course, Memento had Guy Pearce and oh geez, I would need to check again.
Carrie
Exactly,
Ann Moss
exactly.
from The Matrix
Yeah,
and
but
Joey
I mean, Guy
Pants.
Pearce is the guy for me, so that's all I remember. So yeah, I think maybe that was the purpose of Insomnia, but it is definitely an outlier in his filmography.
If I remember correctly, it was also an adaptation from a
Oh,
book.
okay, even.
Um,
Could
yeah, I
be
think
actually, yeah.
so. So that's also something that's a bit unusual for Nolan. Yeah, based on a novel by Nikolai Frobenius. Moving forward to Batman Begins, I don't remember the origin story for how Nolan Watch was approached to direct that movie. I don't know how much he actively decided or pre-planned or thought of his careers in those terms, like, okay, I'm going to do like a big movie. I'm guessing it was also a bit more a personal choice and exploring some
Hmm.
themes and topics.
Um, well, I mean, by that point, this is Nolan's fourth film, right? The Batman Begins. It is a huge franchise. It is probably set to bring a lot of money to the studios. And what is special about this iteration of Batman is that it is very realistic, right? It's set in a very realistic world. There is no kind of crazy special effects in the sense that we could see maybe in Tim Burton films or some other Batman films. Even the kind of the whole aesthetic of Batman. I mean, of course, it is a vigilante in a costume. And we know it from, I mean, from the cartoons that we saw as kids and other older Batman films. It is a bit silly. There is an aspect of silliness to it. Batman, Nolan's Batman is not that, which is in a way great because I think this is also it fit to a certain um era in our life where that was exactly what we were looking for, and I think it works great. Um, Again, there is still, I think, noir influences even here, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, noir influences in, I guess, in the sense is, I guess, the first third of the movie where it's, yeah, the origin story of Batman and the flashbacks to how Bruce Wayne trained and what he goes through with the death of his parents and so forth. yeah, you also said this is his first like huge blockbuster and what makes him known to general audiences. And I think his if now I'm remembering this correctly, or at least what makes sense to me is that why he decided to do his movies, what you just said, that he grounds this comic book character in reality and figuring out how to do that, especially with the costume. A lot of thought went into the design of the costume and the cars.
Hmm.
And well, you also hinted at that he likes to
Hmm.
do practical things and yeah, developing all these well, the Batmobile and the suit and
Hmm.
the cave and the tools. So I guess that must have been
Yeah.
something
And I
interesting
think
to
what we
him.
can also mention here in connection with Batman, because this is probably the first place where we see it starting to develop, is that he is very much into physical effects. He is not into CGI. He doesn't like to do that and use this. So whenever there are some scenes happening, I mean, involving like fighting or blowing things up, this is always done in real, like for real, and not as CGI.
Yeah, in camera.
Maybe we can explain very briefly what noir and neo-noir is, because I think we're still gonna say that a lot, but I don't know if people really know what
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah, go ahead. I think I was also influenced because I was recently watching Spider-Man
Oh,
and Noir,
okay.
so that's why I've been using
I
it.
still have to do that. So noir, film noir is an old term actually. It refers initially to films, to old Hollywood films of the 1940s and maybe even 50s, and specifically crime dramas. And what I think they are usually known for is kind of this moral ambiguity, um, a bit of cynicism, and of course, considering that they are noir, so they're black, they are very shadow heavy. There is also a term neo-noir, which was referring to films of a bit younger generation, and I think this is more, use of like neon. At least nowadays, that's how I imagine it. There's a lot of use of neon, although the themes are essentially staying the same. So, like a bit of cynicism, not very clear moral stances, and so forth. So, a bit of like a postmodern take of noir.
Something that I can add to that is usually it involves following a
Yeah.
detective or investigator who investigates
Hmm.
a crime, like you mentioned, usually
Hmm.
related to some homicide.
I think it also, an aspect of it is that we really closely follow the character and we never see anyone else's perspective. So we are just always with this character that we are introduced to.
So one of my favorite movies and of that genre in general, but of that genre as well, is Sunset Boulevard. It's from the 40s, which follows I think it's a journalist who investigates an actress who's lost her reputation over the years and then goes to interview her and yeah, some tragedy ensures, which is actually showed in the beginning of the movie. So here it's also non-linear. Uh, and then I read that one of Nolan's influences is was Chinatown, which is also like a
Hmm.
noir
I
movie.
guess you can see that.
Um, what I wanted to mention is two things. One regarding the following, and that in watching it, sort of the ending reminded me a lot of The Usual Suspects, which has a twist ending. I mean, that's not a noir film; it's more like a thriller film, I would say.
Hmm.
But
Well, I mean,
yeah,
I
that
think
that was,
actually, is Usual Suspects a noir or a neo-noir?
could be a
That's an
noir.
interesting
Yeah, you
classification
could we could
question.
discuss about we could argue about it. And the other thing was regarding Batman is I actually think that the latest iteration with Matt Reeves directing the Batman is even more so a noir film with also like this
Hmm.
voiceover and detective
Hmm.
than Batman Begins. But yeah,
All right. Well, anything else we want to say about Batman Begins so far? Or, yeah, let's go. So, Prestige. Isn't that your
the
favorite
Prestige,
Nolan
yeah.
film?
I was about to say, yeah, I think it is my favorite Nolan film. Yeah. Regarding time here, I think this is, if I remember correctly, it's also told non-linearly, mostly through, I think for almost all the film, it's told through the perspective of Hugh Jackman's
I think
character, right?
so,
And
yeah.
his notes. And then at the end, we get the perspective of Christian Bale's
Maybe
character.
don't spoil this one.
We hinted a bit at it. The plot is two magicians trying to outmatch themselves. At the beginning, they start as friends and then they become
Hmm.
enemies. Yeah, and what I also love about this movie is the theme of illusion. And well, the whole movie is a whole trick. Similar, it has a very interesting plot twist, similar to the following that I just mentioned, but it is that trick. The movie itself is a trick, so that's why I love about the movie, and that this is one of the movies that attracted me a lot to filmmaking. Is that how you can, yeah, how can you perform
Hmm.
a trick or do magic
Hmm.
with the audience as a sort of
hmm
performative art.
Yeah,
Um,
I think this is exactly probably his reference to his own work in a way, right? Because that's in this case it's magicians, but it can also be mapped to any other well, first of all, any other obsession, probably, because here they are obsessed with kind of perfecting their craft. And then it could also be mapped to filmmaking or any other art form, right? In a way.
and it's also very well, it's a referential in the sense that I mean, these two magicians represent two approaches that Nolan has. One is the very like sort of magical or and the other
Hmm.
and technical, and the other one is the more simple or how yeah, what's the other one is I guess the well both are obsessed, but the other one is the like the
Hmm.
meticulous one or the his craft is more about I don't know, also like
hmm
a state
hmm
of mind, I guess, or keeping a persona.
So then The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight, yeah.
All right. Well, this is my favorite, probably. No, I mean, one of my favorites in Nolan's filmography.
It's probably is your
I
favorite
I
Nolan
am
movie,
torn
right?
between two, but as far as I mean, as far as Nolan Batman films, this is not difficult. Of course, The Dark Knight is everybody's favorite choice. But it is definitely a very pivotal film as far as it goes to like in my personal experience with films. So this is the first feature film that used IMAX cameras.
Yeah, and Nolan has been a bit, what's the word,
Hmm.
propensor or a tries to get other filmmakers to use IMAX cameras, and since Nolan using it on this film, it's been
Hmm.
getting more and more
Yeah, I think
popular.
IMAX is very glad they have such a partner in Christopher Nolan that just helps them get better and better and make them so much money. Well,
Yeah, and not only the cameras, but also I don't know if before this IMAX as I mean IMAX cinemas were
yeah.
there were that many. So because now it's I think well I don't know in terms of revenue, but as a product, it's
Hmm.
very relevant for cinemas that well yeah usually the huge blockbusters at least here in Switzerland get
Hmm.
shown in
But
IMAX
not
and
all of them are originally made on IMAX cameras. I think here we also have to make a distinction. IMAX as a technology is a specific film technology. It's, I think, specifically has to do mostly with aspect ratio, but I might be wrong. Maybe there's some other aspects to it. I don't know. Then there is IMAX cameras that shoot in a way of that technology in this aspect ratio. And then there are IMAX cinemas that have the capacity to show those exact films in that aspect ratio, right? So there are very huge screens, and obviously they need a big resolution. And the kind of big action films get shown, a lot of films get shown on IMAX, or in IMAX cinemas, but they are not necessarily originally made for IMAX or made with IMAX cameras. This is also, as far as IMAX cameras go, I think um, maybe as we go along, we can mention how exactly Nolan um, influenced the development of that technology.
Yeah, but it's a good distinction that you make between the technology and the cinema, and especially on the part of the cinema, it's used like as a brand name almost because, yeah, not all, well, even movies that aren't shot in IMAX get shown in IMAX cinemas, and not all IMAX cinemas have the same screens. There are some that are larger or wider, and others are smaller, and yeah, it's more of a brand name in the case of cinemas. But what I do know about the cameras, and that gets mentioned a lot, is that they're very
Hmm.
heavy and
Yeah,
loud.
that is one of the issues with those cameras. I think we can still, and when we get probably to the Odyssey, we could mention that.
Yeah, regarding the Dark Knight, it is told in this one is also told in linear fashion, and I don't know if there is a time theme in
Yeah,
this
I
movie. I
think
think
as far as the Batman films go, they are relatively stable in their timelines, and I think The Dark Knight even more so than the other ones, because in the first Batman film we have a bit of like flashback situation where we go back to his childhood, which is, I guess, well, it's an exposition, so you do need to know the background story of the character. And in Dark Knight Rises, there's a jump in timeline, right? So there's quite a few years after the Dark Knight happened that the story starts again. So in a way, they have some timeline particularities there. The Dark Knight has none of that, I think.
what I also wanted to, you said it was a very pivotal movie. Yeah, I guess for most of us millennials,
Hmm.
that was like a huge movie growing up. Also had like a huge marketing, and of course, Heath Ledger's character, the
Hmm.
Joker,
Legendary.
which is still, and I think it just this year it got voted one of the most influential comic book movie or something along
Hmm.
those lines. I don't remember the magazine who did that, but yeah, what I wanted to say here, I guess here playing into the film bro aspect, that The Dark Knight is one of the movies that I rewatched the most, and it's because it has so many layers, and the also the pacing and the editing is so quick,
Hmm.
especially at the beginning. There's so much information giving at all times about like the machinations and the scheming of the characters, so that to keep track of that, it took me like, I don't know, four times until I could
Hmm.
understand all of the plot. And then you also have the themes of, well, I think it's one of the central themes is chaos and order, but with, well, the Batman and the
Hmm.
Joker representing those. But the other thing I really like is Nolan uses motifs a lot in his films, and one of them that is present here is he has some instances of game theory in this movie. I think one of them is the scene on the two boats with the prisoners and the civilians. And I don't remember the name of that particular game. I don't know if it was the chicken game. Well, chicken game is one of them, but yeah, that is visualized there in that scene between. Well, this it's a dilemma, right? of what's the best outcome, and also a bit of a moral question, like how would you deal with that situations. And I remember there was oh yeah, I guess the other example of a game theory is the beginning, the opening sequence with the
Hmm.
Joker and his henchmen robbing the bank and then taking
Hmm.
each other out, so that at the end he is the only survivor and
Hmm.
profits the most from that. Between the two Dark Knights, we have also
Hmm.
Inception.
So this is my other candidate for my favorite Nolan film. Um, I have this thing where my favorite films are never the ones that I like on the first watch. Well, there are some that I really do like on the first watch, but there are also some that on the first watch I'm skeptical and I'm like, what? I don't, what? And then after a few months, I'm like, actually, let's rewatch that. And after that, it becomes my favorite film. So this is what happened with Inception. I watched that film in the cinema the first time, and I was like, what? I don't really get it. And but then yeah, things changed, and it is one of those films that are very convoluted. It is probably in the same category with Tenet and Interstellar, where you really have to use your brain. It is also the one that gets criticized for exposition dumps, which is another thing that Nolan kind of does across his very difficult films. So Tenet also, and also Interstellar. Um, the thing is here, the story is by its by design structured in a way that really plays into this obsession with timelines, non-linearity, and um, that's why it makes it so difficult to follow sometimes. And to make it easier to follow, we get introduced to a character that we are kind of supposed to follow along with. And this character is Ariadna, right? Because her journey is kind of mapping our journey, where she doesn't get anything, us neither. So we're in this together, and they are explaining things to her along the film. And this is kind of, yeah, I this is more show, or this is less show, not tell, don't tell. This is more tell and don't show. So this is the issue, I think, with the films like that in his filmography.
Yeah, it's interesting because, well, I was just watching this last night, and yeah, there's a lot of exposition, but also it is at the same time very visual, and that also helps a lot
Hmm.
with the explaining. But well, that's what we said. These sort of uh, complex concepts is what makes them makes the movies great in terms of rewatchability that you just mentioned. Yeah, where was I going with that? Nowhere, like I guess like a left.
See, this is what those movies do with you.
No, but I realized just watching it last night, Inception, that regarding the exposition, the pacing is very, or the rhythm is very similar to The Dark Knight, and I think it has to do with the editing, and that the main characters give a lot of they have a lot of dialogue and give a lot of information, like Leo in Inception, or in Batman it's I don't know, yeah, Bruce
Yeah, I don't
Wayne
think,
and,
but I don't think in Batman you really do need that much exposition and information, because first of all, this is
yeah.
a pop culture phenomenon. Everybody knows who Batman is. You really don't have to explain a lot of things. All you have to do is world building in the realistic sense of Nolan's Batman films. And this is done, I mean, fairly easily, in a way that you are introduced into this world and you do see what mechanisms work in this world, right? So, in that sense, I don't think that you can compare them. Inception is really like its own world, And you do need to explain things, but I mean, maybe we will talk about it when we get to Tenet, but Tenet does that even worse in the sense that it really just over explains things. You either trust your audience to understand what is going on, or you just maybe make it easier to understand.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with what you said that you can't really compare The Dark Knight and Inception in terms of world building and that explanation. What I meant more is in terms of rhythm and editing. And yeah, both of them were edited by Lee Smith, who I think edited all of Nolan films. I have one specific examples on how these two films are similar. In The Dark Knight is all that all that sequence where they are tracking this Chinese mobster, and Batman has to go to China and kidnap him, and all of that. Actually, it's the scene between Gordon and Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent where they're plotting on, okay, how can we do that? And starting with that conversation until the capture of this mobster, there's a lot of explanation of the steps
Mm.
doing and how that is cut. Reminded me a lot
Hmm.
of Inception, the first act, where, well, Leo is also
Hmm.
explaining to Ariadne how this world works and so forth.
Yeah, okay, I see
So
what you mean.
that's
Yeah.
very similar to me. Regarding Inception, maybe a couple more words. Yeah, other of Nolan's motifs and visuals are, well, this never-ending staircase is one of them. Well, there's this never-ending
Again,
staircase, but also
illusions, right? Yeah.
optical illusions. And then Ariadne also being a name from Greek mythology. I think it's the woman leading.
Oh, well,
What's this word? This
yeah,
name in English?
I don't know
Theseus
if
or Theseus
yeah,
out of the
exactly. With
labyrinth. Yeah.
the
Um,
yeah, like a pathfinder for
with
him,
the
basically.
thread. Folding world I mentioned it also, it reminded me a lot of the Matrix in terms of like
Mm,
getting
true.
into another world. Also I thought it was interesting that like connection to other movies. Well, the folding world, I think later Doctor Strange did something pretty similar in terms of visuals. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but how they get out of these dreams is by playing. Well, the first trick was playing a song
Hmm.
by Edith Piaf, right? Well, and it's interesting that Marion Cotillard later played Edith
Hmm.
Piaf, or before that in a biopic. But it also is very similar to Stranger Things, how they get Max out of
Mm.
the pocket or the other dimension. So I thought those were some interesting connections. Should we briefly talk about The Dark Knight Rises in terms of
Sure.
time and chronology?
Yeah, The Dark Knight Rises starts later than when The Dark Knight ended, so it's like a few years after the events of The Dark Knight. Um, for me personally, this was the least interesting Dark Knight to follow. Um, although the antagonist was very formidable, that was a very interesting villain. And actually, what we forgot to mention in The Dark Knight is that it was ambitious in the way that it had two antagonists, actually, right? Like two major antagonists. I mean, of course, there are multiple antagonists throughout the stories anyway, but The Dark Knight had Two-Faced and Joker, right? Which is not nothing. The Dark Knight Rises probably is one of those that has a female character for once that actually plays quite a big role.
Oh, Marion
Oh no,
Cotillard,
I mean Anne Hathaway.
Anne Hathaway, right? Yeah, I don't
Ah,
know.
see, the fact that you
I don't
forgot
know. I
about
feel like
her says a lot about the female characters in Nolan films.
I thought she played well into the sort of flirtiness of Catwoman, but I don't remember if she was that. Yeah, I think she isn't that
Yeah, no,
memorable.
I agree. Like it's again, it's more about the love interest and more into that. There is
Hmm.
an aspect to her where you see kind of her background story, you see where she's coming from, the motivation of the character. Whether it still makes her a very rounded 3D character, I don't know, better than some, I would say, some other female Nolan characters. So not as bad.
I think Matt Reeves, in the Matt Reeves term, Catwoman is
Yeah.
still a bit more interesting because she has
She
ties
also
to
has
other
more screen time,
characters
I
and
think.
also have like a back. Yeah, that's true
She
as
is also like worked as one of the main characters, I would say. I mean, of course, Batman is still the
yeah.
lead, but she is a very heavy support character.
We said before that he likes to guide us through the point of view of one of the characters, and in especially in his later movies, the cast is quite huge, but I don't feel like his movies are usually that ensemble driven. Maybe Dunkirk could be one of those, and maybe Oppenheimer. We'll see about the Odyssey, but usually it's very focused on a few or on one character. Do you remember in The Dark Knight Rises what Bane's main like argument or thesis was?
No, he's just an actor of chaos. I don't really remember exactly anymore because I really haven't seen The Dark Knight Rises for a while now.
I think that the main idea is what you said, agent of
Hmm.
also like an agent of chaos, similar to the Joker. But I remember that idea being tied also to something related to game theory, or there's one example of them. But maybe what we could briefly mention here in the Dark Knight Rises, um, which also happened in, I guess, The Dark Knight and Inception, is the set pieces that Nolan is very, uh, I would say, is very well known for the set pieces. And The Dark Knight, one example is, I mentioned it briefly, is when Batman captures this mobster and he has to use this sky hook where he latches onto
Hmm.
a flying plane to, yeah, exfiltrate the this mobster. Then in Inception is this, isn't this where
Hmm.
well, they turn the walls and they start
Hmm.
falling and tumbling? That was also like a set piece. And one of the most impressive one is in The Dark Knight Rises, where Bane, what's it? Well, he hijacks this plane and they blow
Hmm.
up this plane in midair, and then they take also like a prisoner or something. But yeah, that
Hmm.
was super impressive
Hmm.
how that looks on screen.
Interstellar. Do tell. How am I
How are you
feeling?
feeling?
About Interstellar, I feel not
Are you feeling stellar
like
or interstellar?
I don't feel much, I would say. Interstellar is fine, but not my favorite.
Yeah, some say this is the most, I guess, not emotional is the wrong word, but what's the
Personal,
correct
intimate?
words? Intimate, yeah. Less because we mentioned that the previous films
Hmm.
are quite cerebral in a sense, or there's a lot of thinking, and this is the most human movie in the sense that you
Hmm.
can relate to the characters, to the main characters, because his relationship towards his
Yeah, I would
kids and
argue
so
that
forth. And
probably so far all characters in all other films were motivated by some personal thing. But yeah, I don't know, somehow maybe this one is a bit more approachable in a way because, well, first of all, we get exposed to the fact that the Earth is dying and the planet is not going to be livable in the nearest future. And then there's the children that he does that for, right? So that is his motivation. I think this is probably, yeah, in that sense, the most personal film.
yeah, also Interstellar, what I remember mostly about the movie is almost the ending when he's in this string dimension, and we covered a couple of these themes when we were talking about this year. We talked about Project Hail Mary, and there were some similarities there in terms of visuals, while also it being in space. I also remember the music that I also mentioned in Project Hail Mary. This these couple of notes. There's a theme in here. The soundtrack is by or the score is by Hans Zimmer, who also worked with him in on The Dark Knight Rises and other movies.
Yeah, we probably actually should get to music at some point, but maybe we should go there when we get to Oppenheimer, because that's probably going to be your topic.
Yeah, let's just
Yeah.
finish our review of
Yeah,
time
so
in Nolan movies, and then we'll get to.
Interstellar is time-wise also not a simple structure, but it brings time into the story, I think. This is probably the first time that we see time as kind of almost a character in the story. So it's not only just an editing element or a structural element, but it is an element within the story and it has effect on the story.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. In Dunkirk, I think it's mostly a narrative device
Hmm.
that we get.
I mean,
Well,
everywhere else,
this
I think too,
the
right?
story
I mean,
about.
also in Memento, if you were watching the story from the perspective of a person, like one singular person, it would be linear, right? But here, because the physics of the world don't work the same way, time becomes just like a player in the game, right?
Yeah, and Dunkirk it was, I guess, for me it was the most like an ensemble movie of all of his because we get different stories from the war in around Dunkirk. I think they were also not told in
Hmm.
a
I
linear
think they
fashion.
are told in a way that it's the same snippet of time told from different perspectives. And then you just go
Hmm.
along as you go through each perspective, you go to a further iteration, right?
One step
Something like
forward.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's also a narrative term for that, which I forget. When you tell the same event from
Hmm. Hmm.
multiple perspectives. Which is something I said, the following already had
Hmm.
a lot of those elements. And one of them is it's a bit different in the following because there it's I mentioned it's we visit the same
Hmm.
places multiple times. So in a way that is similar and for the following it also made a lot of sense because it was his first movie and that way he you get to save a lot of budget by filming in just like
Hmm.
a few selected rooms
Hmm.
or locations. In Tenet, I would argue that time is again also a
A
how did you
central
put it?
element,
A
a protagonist
yeah, central
almost.
element in a character almost. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
you go
Hmm.
ahead with Tenet. I really have no comment here.
I have only seen this movie once, so I again it was very complex how, but basically secret agents traveling back in time to prevent
Hmm.
stuff from happening, and I forget the exact machinations or explanations of the device of how that worked. But I think there is a also like a visual element at the beginning of the movie that explains it. Wasn't it like a door or a mirror or something you go through?
I really don't
Uh,
remember
it's
almost
yeah,
anything about this film.
but it's very similar in the sense that we mentioned these
Hmm.
infinite staircases for Inception, and it's also like a concept that already existed, and he took it like to the. I mean,
Hmm.
he uses that to explain it, and
Yeah.
takes it to the next level. What I do remember is one action sequence, one chase is basically where it's all the characters sort of running backwards and a car that is flipped
Hmm.
backwards and that looks very
Hmm.
impressive on screen. I think there's also a scene at the airport that I don't know if we get to see that twice. It's sort of like also like a heist at the airport and then we get to see them moving backwards. But uh, yeah, I think it was told
Okay.
twice from the forward and the
Okay.
backwards perspective.
Yeah, I think this is, I mean, it's a fact that Tenet is the most polarizing of Nolan's films because I think this is was also the first one that, yeah, people didn't really get, or people didn't were not as excited about as some other films before Tenet. It was also the first Nolan film to underperform at the box office. And it really is kind of that film that is very convoluted, very cerebral, but at its own expense, let's say. So it's very impressive, technically speaking. It's very impressive from the story perspective in the sense that you had to come up with that. But it is not very likable and not, at least for me, very watchable. You can watch it, you can maybe even get it, but rewatching it would be a bit of a challenge.
I guess this has to do with, well, multiple things. One is what we mentioned that is, well, there's not a lot of
hmm
human component here, and that the sort of the trick or the premise is what makes the movie, like this traveling backwards. You also mentioned that, well, this has a
hmm
lot of exposition,
Oh
maybe
yeah.
too much. So all of these elements, I guess,
hmm
makes it so that this movie doesn't quite work. And well, maybe here it's Nolan getting a bit too obsessed
Yeah,
with time and
yeah.
his puzzles and
Also,
so.
I think I may be wrong. This movie came out in 2020, and I think it was just 6 years ago, but this film was 2 hours and 30 minutes long. I think in 2020 it was, I mean, there were long films, but it was still not as common to make 4-hour films as it is today. So I think also the runtime of this film makes it even more complicated to watch because it's just like you have to be locked in and you cannot flinch for 1 second. If you miss anything, you're out for the rest of the film. And I think this is kind of what makes it worse. It's really just like you cannot relax while watching this film at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. That at some point you
hmm
need a breather or something, right? To just relax a bit because it's
Yeah.
so much information, so many things happening on screen. I guess also for general audience, but for me, it's like the missing like human component or like emotional connection to the movie. I mean, this is also like a mission movie or a thriller movie or heist movie. I was just thinking of something like Top Gun, which is in a sort of similar way that you have an objective that you have to get to. But in Top Gun Maverick, you had those human elements, emotional components between the characters, and emotional ups and downs, which I don't remember Tenet having.
Do you want to talk about music here? Because I think most of Nolan's filmography, he was collaborating with Hans Zimmer. In this film, it was not Hans Zimmer who wrote the score.
Yeah, I think actually starting with Tenet, he started working
hmm
with I mean, one of Hans Zimmer being one of my favorite composers, but the other one is Ludwig Göransson. And yeah, I haven't listened back to the score since seeing the movie. What I do know about Tenet is that there was also like a lot of experimentation going on, and then that they Göransson and Nolan experimented with playing the same, I guess, melodies forward or sounds
hmm
forwards and backwards. That is something that they did because it plays into the themes
hmm
of the movie.
Let's go to Oppenheimer, where we can talk about all kinds of different things. So
Okay.
Oppenheimer, this was a biography, right? So this makes it different. Puts Cillian Murphy as the lead man, which is great. So far, we have seen Cillian Murphy work with Nolan on two occasions, I believe, and those, oh, well, three before Oppenheimer. and he was a smaller supporting character. Here he is the main man. Um, and I think here there are a lot of different things that were quite different to what he usually does. They even had an interview where they talked about it, right about when Oppenheimer came out, where they were describing how they were doing that, how they were shooting this. It was very interesting too.
Yeah, isn't this wasn't this like something to do with rain? They filmed raindrops or some, or is that in the movie? I remember it being like a natural phenomenon, and then they sort of adapted that a bit. And but yeah, it's super interesting how they came. I mean, visually it looks very interesting, and like you said, it also shows Oppenheimer's way
Hmm.
of thinking. What I mean, you just said it, is that what I remember mostly about the film is the build up to the test of the atomic bomb and the explosion, and the question throughout the whole movie. You have the question, okay, will they show it? How will it look? And you're sort of scared and anticipating it, and that's the emotional connection that I mentioned that was missing in Tenet. But then Nolan showed it in Oppenheimer. What I remember is I was afraid of how it would sound, but then I was relieved and amazed that actually there's no sound playing over that
Hmm.
sequence when the bomb goes off, and it
Hmm.
leaves you in amazement. And the same images that you just mentioned of how Oppenheimer is thinking, and those fires and those like sort of how does it look like? It's like
Hmm.
matter
Particles. Yeah.
life, yeah, particles pulsing through the screen, and that looks beautiful, and you're amazed, but it's at the same time
Hmm.
something terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, so Oppenheimer was also the first film that won him um, two Oscars for Best Picture and Best Director in 2024. There were nominations before that for Memento, Inception, and Dunkirk, but Oppenheimer was the first that won.
Yeah. Talking about time, I remember this movie being a lot, also very much about perspectives, and there are flashbacks, I think, and I don't remember flash forwards, mostly between the relationship between Oppenheimer and Levi
Hmm.
Strauss, who's played by Robert Downey, and they're sort of also like sort of competition and view on certain things, and animosity. And then isn't it at the end sort of it was also about the legal
Hmm.
case against Oppenheimer, that he
Hmm.
got prosecuted or not investigated
Hmm.
about what he was doing in the village where he was researching, and how that shifted
Hmm.
throughout the movie, and that perspective. Regarding perspective, I also remember that the Nolan wrote the script for this movie, and he wrote it from Oppenheimer's perspective, which is something that is not very typical
Hmm.
for movie scripts. But yeah, it makes total sense. Like we were saying, that he chooses usually one character to dive into the story.
And regarding the black and white scenes, this is where we can tie back up to IMAX because apparently it was not so easy and not so easy to shoot with IMAX cameras in black and white because the resolution was just not up to the standard. And this was one of the things that got improved thanks to Nolan and his work with IMAX. That then they were able to bring the quality up and then use it for those scenes as well. As far as the Odyssey, so we already mentioned that IMAX cameras are very loud, and this is what um, is the biggest hurdle when shooting with IMAX cameras. What is also specific about them is the fact that the runtime is 3 to 5 minutes. So you can, with the camera, with the magazine that you have, you only have the capacity for about I think 3 to 5 minutes or something like that. Which is obviously not ideal if you're shooting a film that is going to be how long? How long is the Odyssey? Almost 3 hours, 2 hours and 52 minutes. So one thing that they did is, I think, reduce the noise. Um, and this is already a step up again. Um, Nolan is just driving forward the quality of IMAX almost single-handedly as a director. There are other people technically doing that, but yeah, there obviously it was probably very difficult to shoot with such loud cameras when it came to more intimate scenes or kind of like dialogue, a little more personal scenes, not like some action scenes. Yeah, so we'll see how that's gonna look. Very excited to see that. As far as Odyssey, do you want to say something about it? I, to be honest, don't really follow anything about it. I'm just gonna watch it as it comes. I know that the cast is massive. It is crazy in terms of who there is. I mean, the Odysseus, this is the story of Odysseus, right? It is Greek mythology, and the main character is Odysseus, and he is played by Matt Damon, but there's a host of other characters and actors playing them. Um, I don't know if it is an ensemble cast in the sense that everybody gets more or less the same screen time. Probably not. But in any case, this is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, what has me excited is that, I mean, this is one of the most, or this
Hmm.
is the epic, the human
Hmm.
epic, if there is one. I'm surprised that no one has done this in film. I think probably ever, or well, ever probably not, but like a more realistic version of this, because there have been versions of
Hmm.
Troy, for example, and then I mean another epic was an older one is Ben-Hur, for example. But yeah, I'm really excited for that. How this story is
Hmm.
going to look on screen and how he is going to translate it. And it's going to be interesting to see is because if I remember the Odyssey correctly, it also had like jumps between locations and different characters. So we'll see if it's more a bit of more of an ensemble movie and we get focus on different characters, or if it's very much still from the point of view of I guess Odysseus is my bet. He's going to focus on
Hmm.
Odysseus. But yeah, that's what has me excited for this movie. What I've been reading a bit on social media, some comments is people didn't like well the color palette, which
Hmm.
we can get more into in just a second. And the other one is that the costume design didn't look historically accurate, or it was very it's some I read some comments as well. It looks like the Batman, or it's not. I don't know, not
I
realistic,
really just
or yeah.
wonder what people, if there is even historical records about what is historically accurate at this period of time. Like,
I mean, there for sure is, and there are lots of these also like YouTube channels where historians, like experts of the field, like comment on that. But usually, movies do take consultants into account, like for example, historical consultants, or like other examples being like a dialect coach
yeah,
or
but
weapons
I
handler or
just
what else.
recently heard someone speak to kind of the language and the translation of texts like this. I think, as far as I can remember, the dialogue that is taken into the film is very closely. based on a specific edition, a specific translation into English of the Odyssey. And the criticism there was that it is a very modern language. And the translator that, well, translated the original story or myth commented on that, saying that using, let's say, early modern English would be just as close as using modern or like English now, the English we use now, because this language, this variant of the language, is as far away and has nothing to do with the realities of that era as modern English now. So there is absolutely no difference in how you like how you translate it. And this is what I think about that as well. It is a myth, and it is a myth for a reason, in the sense that you are taking parts of it that relate to your life, to everyday life, and you don't have to be historically accurate. It is a myth. It is not even a factual story. It's not history. That's what it is called a myth for. And I think people just should relax a little bit with the criticisms of stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true, actually. I mean, it's a um, real story in the sense that it was written, but it's still very much tied
Hmm.
to Greek
I mean, there are
mythology.
gods there. Gods are gonna be
Yeah,
playing in
yeah, yeah.
this. So like, come on, what historical accuracy are we talking about? Have some fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, for something like Troy, you could argue because, well, the War of Troy is something that I think happened. But yeah, for the Odyssey, yeah, it's more of a myth, like you said.
About the color palette, can you comment on that?
The criticism I already mentioned that it was looking very grayish, monotone, muted,
Hmm.
something along those lines. And I think, well, maybe it's even more gray for the Odyssey, but usually the color palette in Nolan's films is a bit more monochrome, monotone. It's not very there aren't colors that
Hmm.
really jump out a lot. It's more I
Hmm.
guess homogeneous is the word. And yeah, so nothing really jumps
Hmm.
out a lot. One, for example, in the following I mentioned that's a black and white movie, and for example, for Memento, we also said that he uses black and white to as a
Hmm. I
narrative
must say
tool.
though, I would say Memento is probably one of the more colorful films of his.
Yeah, I was maybe thinking more of Inception, and I was watching a movie on that. Is that it doesn't really distract, or it's minimalistic in a sense that it doesn't distract you from the characters. Like the characters are on the forefront
Hmm.
in Nolan's movies, and yeah, in and the color palette and the lighting as well is the canvas, or he just
Hmm.
places them on there.
I think all of Nolan films are more leaning into kind of blue hues. Um, and you're right, it is kind of more subdued colors and never really anything that pops. What I want to say here is that I think a factor to consider is that Nolan is colorblind. I think, wait, let me quickly check how you exactly call that.
I think it's
Yeah.
red-green blindness. Yes.
Is that how you call this exactly? Yeah, red-green color
Yeah.
blindness. So yeah, um, basically he cannot distinguish between the shades of red and green. Yeah, so maybe, I mean, I would say this definitely plays a role. I don't know exactly how people see the world that have that, so I cannot really judge. But I think if you are a director who wants to have such creative control that Nolan definitely is one of those people, you probably do want to know exactly what is going on and what works. And this probably has an effect. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
For me, it's also it does make sense for him as a stylistic choice, because we mentioned that his scripts and the narratives and the themes are so complex that having something that is not really distracting or something that is more like a constant helps you, well, makes it a bit
Mhm.
easier for the viewer. And I think that in a similar vein, this applies to the score. And here I think I'm thinking of Hans Zimmer in Interstellar, where I remember there are like motifs and themes and that are repeated over and over, and it's usually a couple of notes. And I guess the extremest example of that is The Dark Knight, where it's just this one bass note which plays throughout the movie. So yeah, I think that helps reducing the friction a bit for the viewers.
I mean, maybe. To be honest, I don't know. I feel like it doesn't really distract you. I don't really see how different colors, if of course they are something, I'm not talking about Wes Anderson type of variety, of colors, but just a normal range of colors. But to be honest as well, it does fit into the types of films or the type of films that he makes. Because also, if you think
Hmm.
about The Dark Knight, it is all happening in a huge city. And a huge city tends to have more or less the same colors, street to street. And yeah, I guess in that sense, I don't really have, it's not really a criticism, it's just a note, something to keep in mind, because obviously
Yeah, yeah,
how
yeah.
would you like, I don't know, I don't think it's fair to criticize that, whether it is a stylistic choice or something else, but it's just, interesting to consider as an aspect that affects it.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's in the same vein that we mentioned that he mostly has male protagonists, and that it's certain view or perspective, and he tells stories from that view. So yeah, maybe is it limited? Maybe, but yeah, it does make sense. Also, I wanted to say, like we mentioned, he has this noir influence, and some of and well his films as well. And going back to The Dark Knight, in terms of lighting, I also saw and read that he uses natural light as well, and in a lot of movies you can see that characters are well, if they're sitting at a window, you only get the light from the window, and so that makes that one side of their face is dark, and so that plays a bit into the sensibilities of noir
Hmm.
movies. So these choices make sense because of the types of stories he likes to tell or the settings that these stories happen. We can briefly mention this that Nolan has his
Hmm.
frequent collaborators. I mentioned I think Lee Smith has edited all of his films. His most frequent collaborator is, I guess, his wife Emma Thompson, who
Hmm.
produced all of his movies.
His brother Jonathan, who wrote a lot of his films.
Yes, that's true. And he also has, for me, he has like phases for, I
Hmm.
guess, crews he works with. We talked a bit about the music. There was like a
Hmm.
Hans Zimmer phase going from, I think, Batman Begins or
I
even
think even
earlier.
earlier.
Yeah, until, well, Tenet, from Tenet onwards, he started working
Hmm.
with Ludwig Göransson. And I think the same goes for cinematography, where lately he has been working with Dutch cinematographer
Hmm.
Hoyte van Hoytema. Yeah, so for me that's interesting, like having these phases where with actors, I think it also happens a bit in the sense that, well, Batman Begins, we had Bale, and then in the Prestige, we also had Bale and Michael Caine.
Michael Caine is a very frequent collaborator, though. He's there pretty
Yeah,
much
so yeah,
all the
yeah, yeah,
time.
yeah. I think Michael Caine is equal to Samuel Jackson to
Yeah.
Tarantino along those lines. The other one, well, we mentioned Killian, who he
Four,
collaborated
I
with
think. Yeah.
in multiple movies.
Tom Hardy.
Yeah, and then
Mm,
Marion
hmm
Cotillard, for example, appeared in Inception, and then she also
hmm
appeared in The Dark Knight. And then Matt Damon was in Oppenheimer, and
hmm
now he's going to be in The Odyssey. So usually it's two movies. Oh, the same thing goes for
Mm,
Robert Pattinson was
right.
in Tenet. Now he's going to be in The Odyssey. So I like that. And I heard like he has like a main crew who is very hardworking and always happy to come back to work with him. And I heard Matt Damon and Tom Holland and Pattinson talked about The Odyssey, how they were shooting in some locations in Greece where basically they had to hike up a mountain to shoot some scenes, and that took the whole day. And then the second half of the day, well, or at the end, they had to walk the whole mountain back. So that showed the dedication of that the crew had, and then that they were willing to be there, even though maybe they would make more money on other movies. And the actor speculated. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, anything else you would like to add?
Well, I talked a little bit about, for me, what attracted me to Nolan a lot is these what he likes himself is these motifs or symbols. Like I talked the
Hmm
labyrinths, the mazes, the puzzles, the illusions, and sort of those. Yeah, I guess for me it's always puzzles, or I approached it from a more like narrative or literary perspective. Is like these things that you have
hmm
to
hmm
figure out, and I like that a lot about them. And he has them included sometimes visually in his movies, sometimes, well, they pop on, they pop off, they pop on, they pop off, they pop out. They appear in his movies frequently. So yeah, I like that
hmm
brainy aspect. I guess that makes me a
I
film
mean,
bro.
we did start, we're going full circle. Look at us. This is so Nolan-y of us, but we did start with the film bro, right? So I would just like to go back to it and kind of say it is a bit reducing to refer to Nolan as a film bro director, I would say, because no matter what audiences he attracts, I would say he is a very influential director who brings the industry forward, not only with his films, but also technically speaking, with all the IMAX developments that were done specifically for his projects. Um, and, I'm sure there is a lot of development in the non-CGI effects, that nowadays, I mean, a lot of movies do use CGI, and probably the system or the techniques of doing certain things are either dying out or are not being developed further. Well, he is the one who is again perpetuating this, and he does have his own distinct stylistic, well, style and voice, right? And I think this is definitely something to keep in mind. And I do trust him as a filmmaker. I trust his choices. They usually work for me as a viewer, or on me. And yeah, I am looking forward to the Odyssey. Um, we will see. What I'm also looking forward, now that we were talking about the mythology, would be very interesting to compare the Odyssey to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Because they follow the same myth. Maybe we can see.
Yeah. hmm That would be interesting. Yeah. Doing a sort of comparison. Yeah, just to round up, going along the lines, what you were saying is that you mentioned the development of the industry and the technology and the cameras. I also remember a story of him sharing, or I don't know if it was Heute van Hoytema, sharing the knowledge they had gathered around IMAX cameras with the cinematography of Sinners. So that was interesting. But yeah, him driving the industry forward in that sense, he reminds me a bit of Jean Favre. That Jean Favre is also the one that like launched the Marvel machine, if you will, and also it had a lot to do with technology in that first movie. And then he, I think, was the one that impulsed the technology or the CGI behind the remake of the Lion King, as well as that the dome that they use in the Mandalorian movies, where it's basically screens instead of green screens to show like
Hmm.
fantasy worlds. So in that regard, I think yeah, Nolan drives the industry forward. And then the other thing that I mentioned is that, well, I don't always have an emotional connection with the movies. I mean, my favorite is, like I said, The Prestige. I also liked Oppenheimer a lot, but Nolan always makes you think, on misleads you and guides you through a maze. And I think that sort of reaction that he gets out of you as a viewer is really interesting, and that is why I trust him.
All right. It's a wrap.
Okay, that's a wrap. That's a wrap on Nolan. Yeah, if don't go anywhere else if you wanted to find out about his filmography and his filmmaking, this is the best place. This podcast is the best place to learn all about that. Now, of course, we are also very biased and bring you just one point of view. But as we hinted there, Nolan is one of those directors. There's so much information and content out there about his filmmaking that, yeah, you could just dive into that and submerge yourself for hours in that. But yeah, I'm also looking forward to the Odyssey. And until then, I'm going to close with a quote from a podcast that I used to listen to, and they would also shout this out at the end of their shows, and that's Dunkirk.
Wow. Not a Cage quote this time. What a pity.
Cage is returning in the next show. Okay, thank you for listening, and see you next
Bye.
time. Bye.